these days, but those of us who've been around the block a few times know who Tony Tam is. And so he's going to be coming by. But I wanted to get your take on something because I'm neck deep in spec-driven development right now, trying to understand what it means. And one of the definitions that I found on GitHub site, I believe, said basically the core of it is a PRD, a product requirements definition driving the spec-driven development process. But it has other components which I won't go into too much. But and then API blueprint, has kind of come
Oh,
up as, in several conversations with folks and people that I've been having, and just, so the take I want to get from you is like, what's changed from the time where, you know, you guys were really pushing forward with things at Apiary, and we were kind of in this renaissance of design first. And it was, I would say, it was early API product days. Maybe Apogee was like, APIs as products. Apiary was very design first, and it was a very markdown, very, not, it wasn't JSON or XML driven design. And so what's changed from like 2013, 14 to now, would you say, when it comes to our API products?
so many things, and you're gonna have to let me ramble on here.
Ramble.
So, so first of all, I think the most important thing that you mentioned there is the design first approach. In the design first approach, it's very much a products outside in approach, where you say, hey, if the API is a product just like any other product, you absolutely have to be able to, get the requirements from the markets, put together a design that is only a hypothesis for what you think a good product should look like, and then maybe use that design to go out again to the market and validate that that design is going to satisfy the market's problems, and then iterate around a little bit, and get more validation. Make sure you're building the right thing. That was very, very important back in the days when it was expensive to build. It's not as expensive to build today, but there's still friction. First of all, if you build the wrong thing, okay, well, you're going to spend a bunch of tokens. Okay, who cares? But you're also going to put things out in the market that won't work. You're kind of like wasting your reputation, your good reputation, that you have. So it's important, even though it's cheaper today to build things, it's important to build the right thing. Still important to build the right thing. So API design first, and doing design first on any product is important, with market validation and so on. So API design first, I think, back in the Apiary days in 2015, was ahead of its time. It was a good idea. It was ahead of its time because the tools that were out there were kind of not only difficult to adopt, but it required a mentality change. It required people to change, and people don't want to change, right? We were all used to, barfing out codes, and, that was our API. And when we want to fix it, we'll go back into the code, and by golly, we're going to fix it. Now, over time, as APIs became, more and more product-like and more important, we came around to the fact that, oh, well, maybe we have to have a spec so we can do other things. Maybe we have to know what the thing actually does so we can go back to it and it consistently does the same things over and over again. But the tools didn't improve that much. I think what's happening today is we now have tools that have improved, and they allow us to truly do design first. It's become easier to do design first. You mentioned spec driven development. That's very important. Spec is not just the PRD, which PRD, product requirements document, is what's coming from the market, from customers, and so on. Spec is also technical spec. It's the technical design of the product. It's always a good idea to build with spec in mind, products as well as technical spec. So now I think we are building out the tools that enable us to do that at scale and very fast. Markdown specs are one thing. The context that we put into LLMs and tools that we have is another thing. It's very much that design first approach, kind of writ large, and now becoming actually usable, I think. So all that we were talking about years and years ago, I think now is becoming more of a reality. Doesn't matter if it's API Blueprint or OpenAPI or Swagger or Ramble or whatever it is, it's spec. Now, back in the day, I happen to think that API Blueprint was more usable for humans to go and write. I still think it is. I think it's still easier to write Markdown, and we see a lot of use of Markdown these days rather than YAML or JSON for humans, maybe for non-technical humans. I don't know if it's that important anymore for humans to write out the specs in a structured language. Yes, it's important to express the specs in a structured language, but humans can now just speak what they want in the English language. And machines can translate that for us and structure it. So the intermediate format is not that important anymore. What's important is for you to know what you want to build, have the taste, have the input from the environment and the markets, and be able to put that into your PRD and into your spec so that you can then build the right thing.
The hopefully the chat is working now. Y'all give it a shot.
Yeah.
But I do see your question, David, and I'll ask your question in a second. But there's a at that intersection what you talked about. So you're kind of a special snowflake in that you span engineering and product realms, and you're doing the Lord's work to like bring these two
Ah,
camps together. And in most organizations where I've tried to do that, it's difficult because product people don't want to be in GitHub and engineers don't want to be in a spreadsheet and we don't and those things. Yeah, chat works. Woo! Um, and uh uh and so and a lot of people are trying to bridge this world, but I've
mm,
kind of gotten to the point where I'm not sure we need to expect all engineers to know about the business and all business people to know about the technical details. And I'm kind of seeing the spec-driven artifact bundling and what you described as being kind of the
mm,
best of both those worlds and that bridge building. And that I think maybe I was mistaken when I was like, oh, API Blueprint in RAML or
mm,
well, RAML too, but OpenAPI in YAML, and that's going to bring more business stakeholders into here. But I feel like that was misguided to think that they're going to go edit a YAML document in GitHub, and I feel like the markdown, the balance of open APIs and PRDs and this bundling of many specs can be a better bridge builder, and then we don't need everyone to come together. They can just kind of negotiate it back
mm.
and forth with our co-pilots kind of guiding the way.
I think the biggest problem has always been, hey, we don't know what the thing is supposed to do. We can't agree on the specs because we can't agree that this is the one spec where everybody is having the discussion and is agreeing on. I think this has been the biggest problem. And it kind of doesn't matter what that spec is as long as everybody can go find it, in the middle of the night without asking others. As long as everybody can point to the one place and say, this is what we're building. Does everybody agree? Yes. If you don't agree, let's have a discussion. Great. Now, how easy is that spec to edit? Yes, in the past, it's been kind of like tough for like non-technical people to go and edit YAML and JSON. Sure, of course. All of that doesn't matter anymore because it's all easy to edit. Because I can sit here in Claude Code and tell it what I want, and it will translate it to any format that I need. And I don't even need to go, not even need to go look at the markdown if I don't want to. I can, but I don't need to. But I can point to the place where the markdown file lives or the whatever file lives, and I can say that's the source of truth. We've checked it into version control, and we all agree on where the source of truth is and what version this is. I think that's the important thing. And that's how you get all the humans, the human problem that we were talking about, to kind of, work together towards that one common aligned goal. I think that was our problem in the past. I think now we're solving that.
Agree. And this kind of is a good segue, I guess, into David's question, is in an API product mindset, how do we truly shift left and tech lead or lead each the product folks that and security must be part of the requirements, not just the UI stories, but the security stories and everything, especially with the rise of agents. And so you have a diagram on your level
Mm,
250 that's like this cumulative. And so shifting left means for people who are listening, the software development lifecycle moves from left to right, and right is production,
mm,
and these are actually many iterations, little circles and then big circles, and you have a really good diagram that's kind of an accumulation of the artifacts. I mean, back in the day it was OpenAPI and JSON schema and the accumulation on this, but the spec-driven, what you described, it's a continued
mm.
accumulation. And so what do you see as far as shift left? I mean, I
Yeah.
I kind of question, does shift left even exist, or what's your view on shift left?
So, I mean, all that shift left means is, look, we're going to make the design decisions, or we're going to make the architectural decisions earlier than we used to. We're not going to wait until we kind of see what comes out of the building process to fix the architecture or the security issues. We're going to build them early on. Now that becomes super, super easy with context engineering. And it was, I would say, always easy if you were disciplined enough to use it with automation. So the shift left mentality existed even 5, even 10 years ago, even before that, where you could say, hey, I have these patterns that I want to use, and I want you at design time to apply these patterns and let me know if my design meets the patterns. If it doesn't, throw it out, throw an error to the user, and tell them, hey, do better. And the design isn't a design unless it also meets the technical requirements. That's what we were saying, that the spec is not necessarily just a design or kind of human artifact. It's also a technical design, and that has to be part of it. It's becoming now very, very easy to do that with context. Call it context engineering, whatever you want to say, but the context is important. So now I can say, hey, alongside with all of my things that I want in my PRD and my design, you will also respect these technical specs, these technical rules, if you will. And I didn't watch Kevin's session last week, but I'm sure he hits on that with the skills and so on, because that's what they're all about.
Yeah, I'm neck deep in those, trying to understand what the different files are. The basic low level rules.md, skill.md,
Mm.
um, and then Claude.md, and there's kind of a Venn diagram of like what these things are
Yep.
for. But then last week, I also had a conversation with Anna Doherty she used to be Stoplight's product manager. Now she's
Oh
at
yeah.
Arnica, and they're doing some really cool stuff. And she gets that whole pipeline, the rules, and they found that waiting for the pipeline to kind of enforce things isn't always the best, like in a shift left way. You want to shift left, but how do you build in guardrails and a lot of these
Mm.
different file systems and kind of become the bumpers or the guardrails
So
for teams and for
I'll tell you
developers?
the way I do it. So the way I do API design these days is the following. I first start out with 2 or 3 documents. My first document is the actual requirements document, what I've learned from the market about the thing I want to build. Maybe I want to build just a small feature. Here's what I want to build. Here's my hypothesis for what would work. The second thing is a document about the entire market or domain, if you will. Something maybe coming out of domain-driven design that you talked about. But hey, if I'm in the education market, here's how it works. Maybe, there's an instructor, there's students, all the objects that we would talk about in the past. So that's kind of like the invariables, if you will, of the domain. And then I have a series of standards documents, just like the API standards documents that we used to have in the past, that were, Word documents in the past, that are in Markdown, and say, hey, for my API, these are the things that I care about. You can do naming, you can do formats, you can do all the good things that were in an API standards document, and you can also include security requirements in there, just like David said here in the chat. And you take these and you basically go build user stories with an LLM, and the LLM will spit out API specific user stories that's going to do a light design on, hey, here's the resources that you need, here's the patterns that you need, maybe the parameters, but it's not yet precise spec. It's user stories, right? And you as a engineer or as a product person can look at these stories and say, yeah, looks about right. Here you missed this, you missed that. It always misses something. This is where you as a human with your taste and experience come in to correct it. Then from there, you can also pass in another context document, which would be about, hey, I'm building out the spec. If the spec happens to be OpenAPI, then you give it a context document, a Markdown document about good OpenAPI best practices. Could be a skill, it could be anything. How do I build good API? Oh, you gotta have the tags, you gotta have the descriptions, you gotta, do components, like all the things that you want in it. Tell it that, take the stories, it will build out the best OpenAPI document you've ever seen. Run it through a bunch of spectral, vacuum, whatever kind of other tools that you have, and a validator, of course, because LLMs will hallucinate. And now you've got a high quality API spec that's both technically and market correct. It's been validated against the market because it came from requirements. It has all the best practices, so you can generate SDKs, whatever you need to do to generate down the line. And it will also be syntactically correct and correct according to the security standards and all the other standards that you had on it. That's coming all from the context. So that your job now becomes, I gotta build that context and make sure I manage the context and maybe have source of truth for the context. Hey, where is our API standards document? Is this the one that we all agree is the right one? Where is our Open API best practices document? Is this the current one that we always want to use? And then you can automate that and package it up, and then you'll move that much faster. And also, because you can move faster, you can validate with customers in the market faster. That means you're building a better, higher quality product that the market wants that was expensive before. I think that's where we're at.
I like it. And the I don't think all the training layer of that is you can have different levels of engineers and product people with different levels of experience because you've got a stabilized kind of base. Every time you go through it, it accumulates. You're still going to need to train and educate, but
Oh
you've
yeah,
got a pretty solid foundation and guardrails that moves you through.
yeah, and you're now able to very rapidly integrate that knowledge that is coming from your team and that experience, because with the tools that we have, you can actually add a lot of knowledge, and the knowledge persists, and you can have built over time the entire team's knowledge, such that nobody's left behind that they don't have the good knowledge that somebody else has. It's a great way actually to build, I think.
And this isn't just limited to developing a RESTful API. I could apply this to asynchronous, A2A, MCP, anything, right?
Any kind of product, any kind of product, I think
It's
is
just
is recommended.
based upon what people need. Um, well, that's 30 minutes and normally I'll chop it down to like 15 minutes for the podcast and then use some of the other things, but I want to take a little bit more of your time, not too much more, but the other part that I'm really trying to work on is finding kind of the signal and the noise as a evangelist, as a pundit, an analyst, whatever. like from the, you've I've been doing this for a long time now,
Mm,
and the game has changed, the social media
yes.
landscape has
Oh.
changed, how we do things. So I kind of wanted to learn from you because I'm struggling, and everyone else I'm talking to is struggling as well. And one of the things I'm using as a kind of lead generation is helping other people who are struggling with startups and their businesses
Mm.
get their word out because I have an audience, and then I learn from them, they learn from me, and we're kind of helping each other. But like, what's your stack look like? What do you do to earn a living and make your world work right now?
Yeah. Oh boy, that's a loaded question. It changes a lot. So first of all, for those that don't know me, I'm a solopreneur. I'm like a solo person, a company of one. So that necessitates that I use tools to the maximum level that I can. What I do is I educate and help people build better products, more specifically API and MCP type of products, you know, around the integration and connectivity domain, if you will. So that's kind of been my background, and I think these days you have to be able to be known for a thing that you do. For example, you are the API evangelist. Everybody knows that there's this label, there's this persona, there's these things that you do. You write stories, you document, you have opinions, but kind of like it's not just about your opinions, it's about telling the stories out there in the markets. And you've been doing this for a long time. So I think this is something that people have to have. You have to have a way for people to say, yes, I recognize this person. It's the person that talks about A, B, and C, right? And even down to what you're doing. For example, you're wearing these Hawaiian shirts all the time. You have a persona, right? So, and that's a matter of taste, but also it's a matter of being able to stick out. So you got to be able to do that. And then you got to be consistent about putting a message out there. You got to decide, hey, as an API evangelist, for example, this is the people I want to serve. Maybe it's engineers, maybe it's product managers, maybe it's people building startups. You have to decide what your segment is going to be and put out value and content and information. And putting out value is going to mean something like, hey, you have your newsletter. Maybe you're doing the sessions that you're doing here that you're doing for free, but to inform and educate people. And you're also helping, but you're also putting your name out there. And then when it's time to make a living, build a product, then you have people that will listen to you because hey, you're not spitting out nonsense. You've been helping and giving value. So I think the stack today is going to be, of course, you have to have some kind of website, landing pages, and so on. You have to have some kind of social. Other people prefer LinkedIn. Other people prefer Twitter, known as X today, and other people prefer Substack. I think these are the big pillars that you see out there. Particularly myself, I'm big on LinkedIn. I write a lot there. I think it aligns with whoever I'm speaking to. And as I said before, I use Cloud Codes a lot to help me with my basically, not forgetting things, being able to do analysis, being able to say, hey, here's all the feedback that I got from my courses, or here's all the conversations and chats that happen in the courses. What am I missing? What are the gaps? Identify those gaps so I can maybe go work on them, maybe take them as opportunities and don't tell me how to fix the gaps, but identify the patterns that are happening there. So the stack is very very simple. It's just the usual cloud code and a bunch of skills, and then just writing on LinkedIn. And I'm also trying to get a newsletter off the ground. That is something that I haven't ever done, and I feel it's a gap, unlike a lot of other people that, like you,
Yeah.
that have been doing it.
Yeah, newsletters are super critical.
Yeah.
Um, for me, like, so I produce four newsletters every Sunday afternoon. And everyone I tell that to is like, what the hell's wrong with you, man? Like that sounds like a lot of work. What are you doing? And like it is the most enriching, rewarding for me to take the
Mm.
week before in four different domain contexts. So the four domains are Kinlane, me, just my create, what interests me. And then API Evangelist is one domain persona. And then the other two are Navtico, but one's internal and one's
Yeah.
external.
Yeah.
And that ritual of producing it, like what goes in there, what are you trying to say to your audience is very much like for me the gateway drug to product management. Like what do you think about, what are the pieces, who are you speaking to, what matters the most? And each product's going to be slightly different based
Mm.
upon what you're trying to do. And so it really newsletters I think are important. You should talk to Fran where his head's at with newsletters because it's
Yeah,
it's super
yeah,
interesting.
definitely. Definitely. Buddha has a really good question here
Oh yeah,
in
yeah.
in the chat.
Why don't you read it?
Yeah, well, he's saying, hey, AI generated or AI augmented content, is it useful or is it flooding the space? Well, first of all, it is flooding the space. And the reason it's flooding the space is because it's easy, it's cheap. Like anybody can go into ChatGPT or whatever your preference is and say, hey, write me a thing about topic. Or even better, see this post that Kin Lane wrote? Write me one just like that because, it got a lot of likes. I want that. I want a piece of that. The problem with it is, as Buddha is saying, it's flooding the space, thus making uh, a little bit more difficult for people to actually get the word out. The counterpoint to that is anything that is not AI, direct AI slop, is going to rise out of the slop. It's going to be very apparent that something is real content that a real person wrote that is actually valuable versus all the other slop. What happens with AI is, I know a lot of people have said this, AI is a mirror. It's a mirror of what you put into it. And AI is the middle ground, it's the middle of the road. It's been trained on everything that's out there. So, absent any instructions or context, it's just going to give you straight middle of the road stuff. And it's going to look exactly like anything else out there. And that's why you see all this slop. Can you use AI with your content? Sure, you should. Um, there's a couple of ways to do it. For me, I find that for the most part, I don't use AI to write. I write my content myself, and that's where my best content comes from. Would I use it and do I use it to, you know, um, fix parts of my writing? For sure. For sure, I do it. Do I use it to create the structure of my content calendar? Yes, absolutely, I do it. But anytime I will say, hey, I'm lazy today, I just need a piece of content. Let me, spit something out that's along these lines. It invariably produces very middle of the road stuff. You can do that all day. Just recognize that it's not going to be high quality. And people are starting to be able, or people have been able to tell. I think that's my take. You need to be doing a lot of your content. It needs to be coming from yourself. It needs to be something that you couldn't Google. It needs to be an opinion. Basically, it needs to be an opinion, is what it is. And the opinion comes only from your takes, your experience, whatever you've seen as a person.
I like that nuance. And to what did I post on LinkedIn today? I posted something that was so I'm getting more comfortable now that I'm paying attention to the market because I feel like that's what I did as API evangelist, and I was able to find kind of a zeitgeist back in circa 2015. I actually
Mm,
don't know what I'm doing. I barely knew anything about APIs. I just happened to tune in at a right time, 2010 through 2015, find the signal in the noise, and wrote some stories that mattered. And that was the only thing I did. And it was very hard 2016 through 2020 to do that, mostly because my personal life was there was a lot going
mm,
on, so I couldn't like focus. But then COVID happened, and then now we have AI, and it's much more. It's I find it's very hard, especially coming out of not being in a public persona, working at
Mm,
Bloomberg for a year, and then coming into the noise. I was just overwhelmed and overstimulated,
mm,
and now I'm kind of finding the signal in the noise. But echoing what you just said is the signal and the noise, the relationship, the dance there, it matters. Like the reflection of what is the signal is kind of
mm,
relative to what the noise is. And so that, like you said, authentic, real, matters. And I find I enjoy it in different domains because kinlane.com, there's no AI does anything. Well, the images are made with ML, TensorFlow still.
mm.
But API Evangelist, a lot of the research, I'll use AI in similar
Yeah,
ways, gathering
of
ideas
course.
and doing. None of the writing is it's all me.
Mm,
And then TensorFlow images. But then in the Navtico domain, I'm not ashamed to say I use it to write blog posts, but they're usually conversations between me and
mm,
another person, transcript generated, summary generated from using AI, curate it into an outline that it reflects whatever I want to derive, and then I'll give it to that and say write a blog post about this, and
mm,
then I publish it there because not, I'll still edit it and clean it up, but people don't want Kim Lane's voice always on
mm.
Navtico's blog, corporate enterprise. So I try to, tone it down a little bit, and AI helps me kind of do that. But I may change my tune. I'm taking it week by week, month by month, and trying to understand what's working. But social's still really noisy, and I find doing that manually is really important because otherwise you miss a lot of conversations and a lot of things. I
100%.
can't automate that at all. So.
Now you can can encode your voice, but you have to like put quite a bit of work with it. It's really easy to build these skills with a capital S over time. For example, if you're in Cloud Code, you can tell it, hey, we've been doing this process, whether it's writing or some analysis that you're doing, looking at a bunch of numbers and so on. Put that into a skill and then build that skill over time so that it becomes more and more and more and more you, even down to the voice
Yeah.
that you have. And that is a useful thing. That is a useful thing, especially like you said, corporates blog. I want it to be in a certain tone and in a certain way. Let's make sure we have the guidelines there. I think those tools can be very useful there.
Yeah, I agree. And there's another level, SEO, and then
Mm,
I heard now it's called LLMEO,
yeah.
is a discipline. And I was really good at playing the SEO game as API evangelist. Like I would always shoot to be number two after every API out there. So if you search for Twilio, an API evangelist story would come up number two, and that's how I got the attention of API providers. That's changed. That game
Yes.
hustle's changed and is very different. But I've also started and been fairly successful planting seeds with the LLMEO and the
Mm,
LLMs to the point where I have enough content out there from before, but
yes.
also new that's tailored. And when you ask ChatGPT about, to do it in Ken Lane's voice, as you said, they can do it because there's enough of me out there. And so how do you, that's I'm trying to figure out now is how do you write
Mm,
content and write with that intent? Because for me, like honestly, like being part of the noise is how you rise to the top of the noise in the signal. And there's a way to be loud and but consistent, original. There's kind of a sweet spot, and that's how you kind of get ahead and stay at least on the top. You don't drown, is what I do. So.
absolutely. And Kevin is asking in the questions, hey, where can people get your newsletters? And he's talking about you because I don't have one yet. I really want to build a newsletter. So tell them where.
um, kinlane.com, you just got to kind of follow when I tweet it out or do we still tweet out? When I post on Blue Sky or my Facebook, and then there's a link there that you can subscribe to. I don't publish it anywhere because I don't want people that we know, that I have fans, we'll just leave there and,
Oh,
and,
yes.
so, they don't, but then I curate the list too, make sure that it's a fairly refined audience. And then API Evangelist, you just go to the homepage and it's there. Navtico, you can go to navtico.io. And then the fourth one, you have to get a job with me and come work for me again. Kevin specifically, and then I'll give you access to that newsletter. All of you, any of you want to come work with me, that'd be great again.
It's awesome.
Um, but yeah, so yes, staying visible is interesting because you mentioned my shirt.
Mm.
Shirts are second generation V2, the hat was V1, like to
Yes.
and literally just to stand out, like literally because my wife said, you look like all other white dudes out there, do something different. Like, yeah, so I put on a hat and grew a beard, and so like, it's doesn't always play out like in the new environment. You got to figure out the right your flavor, whatever you're doing. The shirts aren't always the thing. Do you do video? Do you what kind of things you do? You just got to
I think
find
it,
your
I think it does. Video has been working amazingly well for me, maybe because I don't know, I didn't grow up with that. I'm not my kids who are amazing at video. I think one other thing that's been working well, and it's counterintuitive, is in-person events. I think people should go to in-person
yeah
events. I
yeah.
think the signal to noise ratio is super high at in-person events. People that are in person are very motivated. Meetups, for example, you have a bunch of meetups over there in New York, really, really good ones.
Mhm.
Bunch here in San Francisco, but any major city around the world, if you go to Luma, lu.ma, look up any major city, there's going to be tech events or other types of events that are happening. I would advise you to go find like-minded people, share opinions, and maybe who knows, people will remember you from your shirt or the bright red shoes that I wear when I go to events, and they'll remember what you said, and it'll be relevant for them one day. Same thing for any kind of conference, large or small. Go to a conference in your domain and speak about the things that you care about. I think it's a great way to connect with people, and personal connections are the strongest ones. Much better than just, hey, somebody followed you on LinkedIn or on Twitter. It's much stronger, and you learn a lot as well.
Yeah, Buddha just echoed it in the chat. Definitely feels like we're craving more in-person
Yes.
interactions for authentic conversation. The recent All Things Open meetup in Raleigh, Durham had
Oh
250
my
attendees.
goodness,
Nice, nice. Yeah, I think
that is amazing.
post-COVID in the AI age, wearing shirts, wearing a hat, and listening and talking to people and shaking hands if you can, if that's your jam, hugging if that's your jam, but at
Yeah.
least just hanging out with people. And but don't I would say in person matters. Yes, yes, 100%. Do as much as you can, but there's also ways I find with the Zoom is Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'm trying to make
Mm.
this a consistent conversation. I get some of the usual suspects in here, which I love. I love you all showing up. Buddha is going to come and talk. David's already been on the podcast. Kevin's been several. David, you should come talk. But Matt, Keaton, you guys should, y'all should come talk as well. And so having this recurring and making it natural, kind of low barrier, interesting, I hope, is important. But then also I do one-on-ones with people, Zooms,
Mm.
and just listen. Like I have someone I have on Wednesday next week, large enterprise coming up against the wall, like politically, how do I make change? What matters? We're trying to figure out this and that. And they just need like a therapist, to be honest. And like, I'm happy being that because I learn like how do they work? How do they operate? And I learn a
Yeah.
lot. And then I just listen and offer advice where I can. And some people, I mean, it's hard. It's hard to be in a large enterprise. I know. I've been there. I know you feel the same way. It's like it'll suck your soul sometimes.
Oh,
And
yeah.
just listening to people on a Zoom for 30 minutes goes a long ways.
It's funny you mentioned that because one of the things I consistently hear, apart from training, I do consulting with often with large companies because those are the ones that need it. I also do advising with startups, but consulting with large companies, and oftentimes I find that they bring you in as a consultant not because you're saying something earth-shattering. Okay, they respect your opinion. You have, a lot of experience. You can train them. You've seen many similar situations and you can help out. But oftentimes it's the kind of therapist role or group therapist. It's like, oh, well, this person is, it doesn't have an axe to grind here or a fiefdom to build. It is not building political capital. They're just here and we're paying them, so maybe we should listen to them. Maybe we should just, listen to what they say because they seem objective. And oftentimes you'll come in and tell them the thing that they know they should be doing, which is exactly therapy. And they'll do it because somebody from the outside said so.
Yeah.
So the role that you're playing, that coaching role, I think is super important. It's like, hey, listen, talk it out, and maybe you hear it from another person who's impartial, and now it's, you get that validation and you get to do what you should have been doing anyway.
Yeah, and be you, do what you do best, get really good at what you do, and people will listen. And that outside in has a strange effect. I really like a lot. That's the heart and core of API Evangelist is people sharing these stories, me telling a story, them pointing to someone internally, look, someone said it, and I'll anonymize them. And that's the old formula. And one story from this, and it feeds into the shirt and the hat again, is when
Hmm.
I got invited. I did a talk in DC for the first round of Presidential Innovation
Hmm.
Fellows. So this is right when Obama started, 2012, or
That was
shortly
like
after.
shaven Kin Lane, right?
Well, because
Unrecognizable.
I was bearded and I had kind of floppy hair and just beard, no hat, no real shirt. And I went and gave a talk and they liked it so much they invited me to be part of the second Presidential Innovation Fellows. So when I went, like the last Sunday before showing up at work on Monday, I went and bought a suit at Men's Warehouse and then went and shaved the beard and shaved my hat. And I told my wife, I was like, I'll meet you afterwards, after my first day. And so I went in, and then Todd Park, the CTO, they were like, Ken Lane, where's Ken? I'm like, right here. And he's like, he didn't recognize me. He's like, dude, what happened? And I'm like, well, that's what you do when you come to DC. He's like, no, I totally brought you in because you were going to be that guy who's going to say
Ah,
things differently and dress differently and be different and like be this kind of, he's all, but you can still play the role. It's cool. But he had this whole like expectation. But then the second part of that story is I was going to meet my wife out in Washington Park out front of the White House, and I said, meet me, right at the corner of the park there, and or meet me on the steps of the VA at the Veterans. And I went out, she wasn't there, and I was like texting her, "Where are you?" And she's like, "I'm over in the park, sitting on a bench. Come find me." I'm like, "What happened? I thought you were going to meet me." And she's like, "Well, I did." But then every guy came out and I said, hey, it went like this. I thought it was you. I didn't know.
oh,
I don't know what you look like without a beard and wearing a suit. And she's like, I probably hit on like 10 of your coworkers before I said, screw this and went over to the park.
oh my gosh. So
So,
be yourself is the lesson.
yeah, be yourself. Don't change for other people. And don't underestimate your superpowers when it comes to going into organizations and just helping people out and do
So
things.
true.
So, um, any other questions?